And we're live now. And I'm going to pause recording, stop recording. So if it says stop recording, it means it is recording, right? And folks are coming in. I'm going to share my screen. All my controls are over here. And Kelsey, I just have a few, just 4 slides to go through.
That sounds fantastic. I'm thrilled to be here.
Oh, you can't imagine how excited I am. Well, you know me, you know how I get. Okay, we have 69 folks in here and 70 registered, so I think we're set to go. I want to welcome everybody to our first ever District Coaches Leadership Training. This is a brand new project out of the PaPBS Network. And we are here. So this is a partnership between the Midwest PBIS Center, which I'll go into more detail in a second, the University of Missouri, through the Office of Special Education Programming Technical Assistance Center. So this is PaTTAN in collaboration with the network, with our community of practice, with these other agencies. So this is truly a first time ever we're doing something like this for our network. I just wanted to remind everybody that it is the state coordination team that works together to create the steps moving forward with the network. And this is a picture that is from our recognition party that we had in November. So I thought it was fun to use it again. This is all of us, and you can see that this state coordination team is made up of folks from the intermediate unit, from EDA, from the Center for Effective Schools, from our SAP partners, Drexel. I think I got everybody, Midwest PBIS. There's a whole group of us that work together on a regular basis to keep the network moving and growing in our skills. So for this project, we have 6 districts who have agreed to, I guess, let them be our firstborn, to be the firstborn of our district project. So the firstborn child, you know, you try everything out, and anything you do well, you take credit for, and anything you don't do well, you work on the second child, right? So with this group, there's 6 districts that have agreed to participate in this. And as a result of that, we're going to be learning from you. And they agreed to participate in each of our monthly coaching calls that will include Kelsey Morris and Kelly Prowse, and I'll introduce them in a second. But these are monthly 90-minute coaching sessions. And you can see on the right-hand side of the slide here, they agreed to send a district coach to these meetings. And if the district coach couldn't attend, we are recording this so they can watch it asynchronously. So in the world of COVID, we are trying to be as flexible and pivot as often as we can. They have a willingness to establish a district leadership team, and Kelsey will go into a whole lot more detail about that. That's really the focus of our first session together. And then, as I said, participate synchronously or asynchronously in our monthly calls. Support from your local network facilitator. And then every month, we're going to be going through a different component of a document that Kelsey was a part of designing. And you'll have these 6 teams will have homework that they'll do in between each coaching call, and then come back and report. So all of you who are, all 77 of you that are linked on that aren't part of the district teams, you'll be able to watch as we progress through this. Now, Kelsey, just so you know, the folks who are logged on, the 77 folks that we have so far, these are our network facilitators. And so by watching what you're doing, they'll be able to, we have the best network, of course. And we have a group of folks who will take this information, and then they will start to establish district leadership teams across the Commonwealth. And then, so that's why we wanted to do it in this way, that we could fully utilize you to support and help us with our firstborn, and then grow this beyond us. So that homework is critical, and we will be going and hearing what it was like for you as district coaches to try to address the different components. And the last thing, and we don't care how high you score, there is no scoring number we want. At the end of this, each one of our district teams is going to submit a completed district system fidelity inventory, and you'll submit that to us. So that's the expectations of the district coaches that are on this call. For all of the 81 now people that are out there, we're hoping that you will continue to learn this information and start to use this to grow the network out there. Let me just say, the reason this is critical to us now is that our network is growing in leaps and bounds. Kelsey, I'm going to boast about our group. We recognized over 560 schools and programs on November 13th who hit fidelity either for tier 1 sustaining, tier 1-2, or tier 1-2-3. And currently, Catherine Poggi from our Pittsburgh office is knee deep in mailing out badges and banners. I almost said bandages. No one was hurt in this, right, Catherine?
No, but we did a big run to UPS yesterday. We had a PaTTAN vehicle full of boxes from roof to ceiling. I didn't know if we could fit a driver in there, but
so even though, Kelsey, we had a virtual acknowledgement party, we are physically mailing their badges and banners to them, and Catherine is leading up that huge endeavor. So with that said, our network is just growing, and our network facilitators are an incredible group of individuals, but they can't continue to grow beyond just getting tier 1 established. Like, we know back in the day, we did it one building at a time, and then we started going district-wide. The purpose of this is to get our district coaches to feel really fluent with the process and start to take over some of those tier 1 responsibilities, so we can alleviate our network facilitators of all that tier 1 training requirements within a district and start branching into our advanced tier work. So we know in our data that is where we're falling down. Not falling down, we're just not meeting what we want to achieve. So it is my pleasure to introduce two folks that are our lead facilitators for the next few months. First and foremost, Kelly Perales. Many of you know Kelly. She is on our Pennsylvania team. We knew her before she hit the big time, and she's still part of our team. So Kelly Perales is the co-director of the Midwest PBIS Center, and all of her detail is there. She is a licensed social worker, and I just feel like it's such an honor and a privilege to not only work with such incredible people, but have them as friends. So Kelsey, do you want to say anything before I introduce, Kelly, before I introduce Kelsey?
I'll just say hello. I'm so happy to be here. I too, like Tina, am very proud of this network, and not only all of the past efforts and celebrations, but also the way that we keep moving forward and taking the latest innovations out of the center and operationalizing them in our state. So thank you. Great to be here.
Thanks, Kelly. I didn't realize how close the names sound, Kelsey and Kelly were. So yeah. So next I want to introduce our lead facilitator for the next few months. And I have to say, this has been a pipe dream of the network for a long time. We've worked as a state coordination team saying we need to build the district component more. And this document came out a few years ago, the DSFI, or there was talk of this document coming out. And when we were seeing that our data was we were not doing as well with advanced tier implementation. Not that we weren't doing it well, we just weren't getting enough traction in the field. My thought was, well, let's look at this fidelity measure. It's a rubric. It can help guide us to better build a district's support. And I went and I was thinking, now who can I get to help us? And I started looking at all the authors, and I saw my good friend Kelsey, one of the lead authors on this document. And so when I saw him in March before COVID took over our lives, I said, Kelsey, would you mind working with our state and help us learn this thing called the DSFI and help us build our district structures? And Kelsey, who some of you may remember or know his voice when you hear it from Swiss training, Kelsey graciously said yes. And I'm so honored to have him here and to participate in this project with him. I am going to put the link to this PowerPoint because I have some hyperlinks in here. One is, you will see, is I did send out to the field. This YouTube video is Kelsey with a district leadership team from Missouri who presented at the 2020 PBIS Leadership Conference. And I know, Lisa Anderson, you watched it and felt that it was very helpful. And then the other thing I have here is I've linked the DSFI. So I will put this link in the chat, and I will go from there. With that, I'm going to stop sharing and introduce Kelsey. And just say, if you have questions for Kelsey, put them in the Q&A and we will start fielding them. If you just want to chit chat in the chat. Right, Kelly? That's what we decided? That is. And Kelsey, is there any other directions you want me to give, or you're good to take over?
I think I'm good to take over. I'm beyond thrilled to be here. Beyond thrilled. Shame on COVID. I'd love to be there in person.
I agree. Now you should be, there you go. Yes.
Okay, so I take it you can easily see my screen.
Easily.
Okay, fantastic. So thank you to everyone who's part of this event, and many, many thanks to Tina for wrangling us all together and for having this pipe dream, as she lovingly called it. I'm excited to be here with you all today, talking about the District Systems Fidelity Inventory, or we talk about it as being the DSFI. So we're going to dive into that today. And like Tina highlighted, we have a series of events that we've scheduled, so that way we can really just work through the DSFI in a bite-sized fashion. So today's going to be section 1, all about leadership teaming, because what I know is that you all are interested and willing in developing a leadership team. Maybe don't have one yet, that's okay, because we're going to talk about the nuts and bolts, the ins and outs, and I'm going to introduce you to what we call the 3 C's that you need to pay attention to as you're starting to conceptualize a district leadership team. So, as Tina mentioned, my name is Kelsey Morris. I'm the co-director of the University of Missouri Center for School-Wide PBS. I am a center on PBIS, so the National Implementation Technical Assistance Center. I'm an implementation partner there. Tina mentioned I'm a co-author of the District Systems Fidelity Inventory, the DSFI. You all, Tina mentioned earlier, as you start to conceptualize district work, she talked about it as being kind of the firstborn. We're really proud of this, which is one of our mini babies, the DSFI. We're really proud of this child of ours. So I'm excited to share this child with you today. And then I've also had the wonderful opportunity of doing this work with district leadership teams. I'm attached to one of our districts here within the state of Missouri as a technical assistance provider for district-wide implementation. So I meet with their leadership team on a regular basis to do a lot of the things that we're going to cover here in this series together. In terms of our intentions for today, I really want to put out there 3 intentions. 1, let's make sure that we describe the logic of district-wide implementation, because we really need to understand, what are we doing? What's the end game here? What's the purpose of doing this? Kind of what's that overarching why question, if you will? Because as you start to move back into your districts and work with your districts to identify, okay, we need to form a team. Who might be good on the team? Who could be a really strong candidate? The reality is they're going to ask you that question, why? So we want to make sure that we describe the logic of district-wide implementation so you feel like you've got some talking points that you can use to help people better understand why this would be advantageous. We're specifically today going to spotlight the implementation driver of leadership teaming. And I'm going to show you today how we have several different implementation drivers as part of our work here with the National Center on PBIS. And so we're going to spotlight one in particular, leadership teaming today. And then each time we come together, we'll spotlight a different one, or depending upon them, maybe two. And then last but not least, what I mentioned earlier, we're going to examine the 3 C's of leadership teaming. We'll talk about composition, characteristics, and communication. But without further ado, let's hear it for you, the Trailblazers. So those of you from Blairsville, Salzburg, Erie, Keystone, North Penn, Perkiomen, and Upper Marion. I mean, when we think about, and I want to get this right, the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, when we think about the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania and what's being done, look at how you're having an impact. You know, we're starting with maybe one little spark, but we're going to blaze the trail. And pardon the dad joke, we like to say that you're passionate about PBIS. So I'm excited to start on this journey of blazing a trail with you. And so let's jump right in. So as we think about PBIS, as we think about a multi-tier system of support, we're always coming back to, we're building a continuum, okay? No training or session on PBIS would be complete without the triangle. So here we are, we've got our triangle. I want you to think about that within our country, we have over 27,000 schools that are currently implementing PBIS. So that's about 30% of what we have within the nation, and we're impacting more than 15 million students. That's fantastic. And like Tina highlighted for your Commonwealth, it's growing. It's growing every year. More and more schools are implementing, more and more students are benefiting. And so when we step back and think about that, it really presents a unique opportunity for districts to plan for expansion, to plan for sustainability. Because you want to get to a place where you're not relying on somebody to always guide, somebody to always assist. We know that we're much more successful long-term, that we can sustain the work better when we build internal capacity to do it. And so within your district or the districts that you work with, it may be that your work has begun with a few pilot schools, some model demonstrations, and they're often running. And there are other buildings, other sites in that district. And so this is an opportunity to really think about sustainability, to think about expansion, and create a district-wide initiative that gives you the chance to build that internal capacity for training, that internal capacity for coaching, that internal capacity for evaluation, and make sure that across the continuum, across that triangle, we've got expertise at tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, and across all levels P through 12. Because as we keep those model demo sites going, or we have schools that are implementing individually, which is a lot of what happens within districts, is this school's implementing, they're an early adopter, a year or two down the road, another school across town's implementing, and before you know it, we've got a lot of different sites that are implementing at tier 1. Now, that's doable, okay? Schools can oftentimes do tier 1 well in a very siloed fashion, okay? But as we start to think about tiers 2 and 3, those are tiers that require resources. Those are tiers that require expertise. Those are tiers that require much more alignment and communication. And so what we caution people is nobody owns tier 2. Nobody owns tier 3. And we don't want a building to feel that it's their responsibility to figure out everything that goes along with an intervention or everything that goes along with a behavior improvement plan. It's too much for one building to take on, and we're much more successful when we adopt a district-wide perspective. So when we say, how can we create a district-wide system for tier 2? What are the district-approved interventions that we can provide training and support on? How can we have systems in place for FBA and BIP throughout the district? So that way we're supporting all students and being able to give that technical assistance, that coaching, so that way all the adults in the district are benefiting. We're kind of providing those those upward supports and upward pressures, if you will. And so when we do that, we kind of work towards maximizing what we've got. And again, you can see on the screen, it says our main goal is to build capacity. We want in-house capacity to do PD at all levels and all tiers. And we want that in-house capacity to provide that technical assistance. So in order to do that, we've got to go back to our circles, our Venn diagram, if you will, where we're thinking about our ultimate outcome, social competence, academic achievement, all kids, regardless of location, regardless of school building. We've got systems to support staff, practices to support students, and data to support decision-making. When we do this from a district-wide perspective, our systems start to take on a new element. We want to align the resources, that old adage of work smarter, not harder. If we've got initiatives in our district that are parallel, that are pretty similar, how could we align our resources? And also rethink, what is expertise? Do we have people in our buildings or in our district that are knowledgeable about behavior, that are knowledgeable about, say, function of behavior? How could we rethink what is qualified as expertise and not just so much be about a job title, but really be about what you know, what you can do, and how you can help? In terms of the data for decision-making, we're going to start looking at data from across schools. So as a district, we want to know, how are all schools doing with the TFI, that tiered fidelity inventory? Because when we look across that, it helps us better understand, what professional development do we need to offer for tier 1, tier 2, tier 3? Do we have cohorts of buildings that seem to all need the same type of PD? And so we can kind of divide and conquer, so to speak, and differentiate the supports that we provide to move everyone forward. And in terms of practices, we're thinking about, what are the practices we have across this district? For tier 1, yeah, everybody's probably going to come up with their own matrix. And so we might think about what's tight and loose. Tight being, we have a matrix within all buildings. Loose being the expectations and the areas where we identify those expectations by location. Those may fluctuate depending upon the site. And of course, at high school, it's going to look different than it does at elementary. At tier 2, what are the standard interventions we have in place to support all students? And at tier 3, how do we do tier 3? For students with disabilities and without disabilities. So how do we make sure that everybody across tiers and across levels is really getting what they need? So again, I started this conversation by saying, I want to give you things that you can use when you go back and work with your districts. And so my hope is that as people start to ask you, well, why is this important? You're starting to have some notes that you can use to help them understand why it's better to work together as opposed to doing things site-based or in a silo fashion. So here's what we call our drivers. So when we think about implementation, we go back to these 9 drivers. And so we're going to, in our series together, using the DSFI, we're going to cover each one of these 9. Because when we designed the DSFI, we mapped it back to each one of these drivers. And notice what's right there in the middle, big and bold, leadership teaming. And that's where we're going to start today. And one of the things that I want you to draw your attention to is that for leadership teaming, you've got executive team functions. So kind of those logistical things, the overarching operations, that some would say the nitty gritty nuts and bolts, just kind of the down and dirty of just being leaders within a district. That's all up there in those blue rectangles at the top, because those are the executive team functions of the leadership team. Below the leadership team, we've got implementation functions, making sure that we've got training happening, making sure we've got coaching happening, making sure we're evaluating what's going on, or as you'll hear me say a lot, keeping our fingers on the pulse of what's going on. So that way we know when it's time to change course, step in, do something a little bit more or different. And then the last, down at the bottom, you've got local implementation demonstrations, those model demos, those exemplar sites, because it's always going to be beneficial for real practitioners to talk to other real practitioners, real administrators to talk to real administrators about how the work's being done. So in our series, we'll cover all of these. We're going to start today with leadership teaming. And just as a quick side note, again, we designed the DSFI to work along with all of those. And we also designed the DSFI to be very similar to the TFI, the Tiered Fidelity Inventory, in terms of kind of the overarching organization of it with a feature, possible data sources, and a scoring guide. What we always advocate is that when a district team takes the DSFI, the items and data find their home on an action plan. And so here's an action plan template that our team here at the University of Missouri has created. It's a Google Doc, and you're going to see a lot of resources in today's session. I always try to make sure that I give people tools in their toolbox. And so at the end of today's session, I'm going to drop through the chat a PDF of the slides with the links. So you could click on the image, like you could click on the image right here for an action plan template, and it would open a Google Force copy. So that way you had something to start with. Maybe you've already got something, but you know, it's always helpful to have more tools. And then being mindful that we use the DSFI to identify where are we now? What's our current reality? And then we're about the business of working to align that. And with PBIS, what are we going to do in this district in order to implement across levels and across tiers? And how does the work that we're doing align with other district priorities, other district initiatives, and valued outcomes? Because when we work to make sure that district-wide PBIS is in alignment with the other things of the district, we actually know we can sustain the work that much more. We get a greater level of political support. We get a greater level of financial support. It aids the sustainability of the good work that you're investing in. I want you, as we move forward, to stay mindful too of implementation stages. This work is not linear. You're going to feel sometimes that you're moving forward and then kind of looping back, taking care of a loose end that all of a sudden unraveled, and then you move forward a little bit more. And through that circular motion, we do make gains and we do have momentum and we do move forward. But I always want people to understand up front, we've been doing this work in districts for many, many years. And our leader here at the MU Center, Dr. Tim Lewis, would say, you need to plan for about 10 years in order to really get that level of full implementation with innovation. It's okay to, as you start this process, feel like your district leadership team is kind of having some fluctuation in terms of membership, because you may have one core group of people who are incredibly supportive of this work as you move through the exploration stage. And then as you start to move into the installation stage and you take what we talk about here with leadership teaming today, you may identify some aha moments for your team and think about, wow, we've got these types of people represented, but we don't have these types of people represented. So we might need to go back to the drawing board and redraft our roster for our team. As you progress, understand it's okay to feel like you're taking steps back, because when you take those steps back, it gives you a chance to really refine and strengthen. And we're going to be in this together. With your district leadership team, okay, the big ideas are that you want this team to have a semblance of decision-making authority. As you create action plans and you create action plan steps and you prioritize things for your district, you don't want to feel roadblocked by saying, okay, we've got a really great idea, but none of us can actually execute this. We have to pass this on to another level, and that other level has to evaluate it and make a decision, and they'll get back to us when they can. You want to be able to have a level of decision-making authority, and we're going to cover that today. You also want to have stakeholder representation. This is the district leadership team that's going to represent people both within the district, within the buildings, and within the community. So you want to have a level of representation that encompasses who your district is. And we'll talk about that today. And I'll give you some things to reflect on and take back as you start to build a leadership team. And then we'll also make sure that the district leadership team has PBIS expertise across tiers and across levels. And I'll give you some resources today to make sure that you feel like that is really secure on your team. Once that team is built, and once that district leadership team, or you'll hear us sometimes talk about it as being a DLT, once that established, they're going to use that District Systems Fidelity Inventory. And remember, Tina started earlier this session by saying the score doesn't matter. It's progress monitoring. And I really want to reiterate that. It's progress monitoring. We would just use this as a temperature check to see where are you now and to help you identify what goes on your action plan to move you one step forward. Because as a district leadership team, you're going to use the data to guide the work, to drive professional development, understanding what do your district staff, what do they need, what don't they need, where are they strong, where are the areas for growth, and then also using the information and the data to help you better allocate resources so that the right people get what they need to take the right next steps. As we dive in today to leadership teaming, here are our 3 C's: composition, characteristics, and communication. So these are the 9 items that are on section 1, or sometimes we talk about as being domain 1 of the DSFI. For today, what we're going to do is take a look at each item individually. And so here's a snapshot of what that would look like. We'll talk about the actual feature, some data sources, and scoring criteria. And then I'm going to give you the main idea. What's kind of the general takeaway? If you work to summarize it, what is that item's essence? And then we also want to give teams quick checks. If you were to facilitate the DSFI, how could you help that team reflect on, do we actually have this? If the scoring guide for a 2 says that we have to have these things in place to be fully implemented, well, here's a reflective question, or here's some documentation that you might look for, or a process, product, or data you might check on to make sure that you've got that in place. We'll also wrap each section. So each one of those 3 C's will have a checkpoint. And that's our chance for you to unmute yourself. You know, I want to be able to answer those questions in real time, because if I had the luxury of being in Pennsylvania, that's what we would do. You'd ask a question right then and there. And so I just want you to know that we've got checkpoints so that way you can compose those questions. And I know that Tina and Kelly are going to be looking at the Q&A, so that way we can kind of group questions together and field those. So the opportunities exist for you to interact, to engage, and to get your thinking answered and clarified. So before we move into our first C on leadership teaming, specifically composition, let's check in. Let's use this checkpoint. If you have questions about the logic of district-wide implementation, I'd love to hear from you, so that way we can make sure that everyone benefits from the new thinking.
So Kelsey, we have 21 folks that are part of our panel, minus, some of the patent people who are on here. So I just want to check in and see, is everybody still with me? Yes. I know some folks were asking about the PowerPoint, but I'm sure you're going to get to that at some point.
Yes, so I've got the PowerPoint that as soon as we end today's session, I'm going to send that to Tina, because she's got all of your email addresses and she'll push that out. And then when we get to the end of the session, right as we talk about next steps, I'm going to drop a PDF into the chat, so that way you've got the resources that we specifically highlight today.
Yeah, one question I see here is, can this be used as a baseline prior to walking through the PBIS implementation blueprint?
Yes, and that's a great question. So we actually designed the DSFI. Some of you may remember the PBIS implementation blueprint had an assessment attached to it. We designed the DSFI to replace that implementation blueprint assessment. making sure that it kind of covers all of the things that are there in that graphic of implementation drivers. So as you're starting to work with a district team on, oh, I see the woohoo, that's great. As you start to work with a team on that implementation blueprint, kind of the nuts and bolts that are present in there, you could use the DSFI to do that, to kind of guide that conversation. And just as a side note, our Center on PBIS is in the process of updating and revising that specific blueprint, the implementation blueprint. So you kind of keep your ear to the ground for things that are coming soon about that, because I know that it's in development. So feel free to, as we go through, you know, we've got other checkpoints and we'll kind of connect with each other like this, because I want to make sure that your needs are getting met today. Let's talk about leadership teaming on that first C of composition. So in this section, we're going to talk about items 1.1, 1.2, and 1.3 on the DSFI. So here is item 1.1, leadership authority. So it said one or more members of the DLT has the authority to make key decisions. So that could be things related to just the budget. Do we have the money to actually allocate towards this action plan step or item that we've put in place? We've noticed that we have a policy mismatch between what we actually do in buildings and what board policy says. Or we're collecting data in our sites that's looking at behavior. You know, we're looking at the frequency of problem behaviors, but it's not in a match with the overarching student information system. So our sites don't have the ability to really get data easily and accurately. Could be anything related to your work of PBIS. So with this, what we're looking for at the district level is that at least one person, one team member at least, has the documented authority. And so we always say, go back to your organizational chart. You know, who's up there in the superintendent's cabinet or your chief officer or whatever the title is in your district. As you start to look at that image, that flow chart of who's up there at central office, can somebody from that group be on your team? So with this, we're looking for people who can make decisions. So as a team, we don't have to wait and pass this on to somebody else to review and send back, but we really want to move quickly about things that relate to training or coaching or evaluation or just the general execution of our implementation plans. And so the quick check that we would give a team on that is we'd say, go back to that organizational chart. Look, if you think about who's on your team, if you look at your team roster and you put that side by side with the organizational chart, where are the lines of connection? How do you draw those lines between the two? And if you can't, revisit that. And if you can, that's fantastic. Make sure that whoever that person is that has that decision-making authority knows that that's the hat that they're wearing. Because sometimes we put people on teams, or sometimes people volunteer or are voluntold to be on teams, and they're not really sure about what their role is. And so it's helpful that the person who is on the team and can make decisions knows they can make decisions. It's also important to make sure that that person attends regularly, because if they're only attending once a quarter, well, we can't make the decisions we need to make to move at the pace we want to move at. So it's important that if we're meeting monthly, which hopefully we are, this person's attending monthly. Now, in one of our urban districts, St. Louis Public Schools, their team is facilitated by their coordinator for school climate. And the superintendent gave that coordinator for school climate decision-making authority. That didn't happen initially. Okay, and so I want you to understand, it may not happen initially. What happened was they kind of got into the second year of implementation and they learned, wow, we're hitting a lot of roadblocks. And it's because we're always having to ask for permission. We don't have the ability to say yes or no ourselves. So that was something they took back to the superintendent's cabinet, and it was a problem that they collectively problem solved and came up with a new way of operating. And I share that with you because that could be a roadblock that you run into as well. The goal being you ultimately want to have somebody on the team who can definitively say yes or no when questions arise. With item 1.2, now that we've got that one key individual on the team, let's talk about everybody else. So our team membership. With this, we're looking for all of those stakeholder roles, A through E there in the item, attending regularly, and that we're checking on that membership and we're kind of auditing it annually to see, is there anybody that we need to add? So we want to make sure that somehow families are represented on the team. Maybe you have a homeschool liaison. Some districts in Missouri have that role specifically, where it's somebody who their job is to be the liaison between families in the community and the actual school district. So maybe that's somebody. Somebody with general education. Oftentimes it's actual teachers within the district who are also serving on this team. Special education, individuals with detailed knowledge about social, emotional, behavioral initiatives. So that could be somebody who is the coordinator for school counselors, the coordinator for school psychologists, and then members of the local community that have an investment in youth outcomes. One of our districts in Missouri has the director of their local cerebral palsy organization. That person has a true investment in the outcomes of the youth in that district, and they've got a place on the membership of the district leadership team. Could be that in some smaller districts, there's a community center for students that's really valuable in the eyes of that community. How can we make sure that that person has a role to play on the district leadership team as well? Now, I mentioned earlier, phases of implementation are not linear. You may get in your first year a few of these A through E, get some things happening in the district, and then cycle back and see, okay, let's audit our membership. Who do we need to add and who do we need to bring on board? Because as we think about this, we know that the district leadership team is going to oversee implementation across all sites. Because they do that, because this leadership team is making sure that everybody's implementing to the benefit of the kids, and those students are coming from everywhere in the community, we really do need that range of stakeholders, both within the district and within the community, to do this work in a truly meaningful way. So thinking about how would we know if we've got that, we encourage districts to compile a key stakeholder list. As you think about your context within your district, who would be on that key stakeholder list? Who do you want to make sure is somehow represented at the district leadership team? Go back to the organizational chart. That's another valuable data source. And then as you start to meet, using your meeting minutes to kind of make sure that the right people or the people you need at the table are attending regularly is a valuable resource and a valuable data source too. Within the new DSFI, and I know we just launched right before the Chicago Forum, we just finished the revisions after a year of national review. We've got our first official version of the DSFI. I've got that in the resources slide that I'm going to drop into the chat at the end of this. In that new version, you've got administration guidance. And one of the things that's there is helping you understand, before we take the DSFI, or as we really start to build a district leadership team, we want to make sure that we've got representation from these groups. So we tried to think about, in the previous slide, I gave you A through E. Now you see A through G. And it's because what we've done is think about who would be the role, or what is the kind of the job classification that you might look for in order to make sure that you've got the correct type of representation. So we tried to give you a pathway, so to speak, to get to that level of being fully implemented. Again, this may fluctuate, and that's okay. The goal is that as you get to a formalized team, it's going to aid the sustainability of the work. When we have membership turnover, it's really hard to make gains and to progress. And I mentioned earlier that having a team in place, a team of people that can make critical decisions about implementation, it's really going to impact political support. So just kind of getting that good PR within the district and within the community to buy in and believe in the process of not doing this site by site anymore, but really doing this across the district. And as well, financial support. The last item we're going to talk about before we do another checkpoint is team expertise. So when we think about the composition of the team, we've got that person with decision-making authority. We've got the actual stakeholder engagement, the people from our community, both within and without, that are on the team, the membership. Now we're talking about expertise. With PBIS, we're talking about that continuum of support for all students, tiers 1, 2, and 3 across all levels, PK through 12. So we want people on the team that know that can do that, both training, coaching, evaluation, all tiers, all levels. And when we have that in place, it gives us the opportunity to differentiate by level. So it could be that, our high schools, they're getting started with tier 2. So we've got the ability to provide support to our secondary schools about advanced tiers. Our elementary schools have been early adopters of PBIS for many, many years. So it's not so much about providing new information about the advanced tiers, it's about sustaining the work they've been doing at the advanced tiers. Having people with expertise on our team gives us the ability to make sure that the buildings get the supports that best match where they are and what they need to move forward. What we ask people is think about your roster. Do you have people on the team that have a level of expertise? And one resource that I'm going to leave you with or highlight today is the PBIS Trainer Coach Self-Assessment. So earlier there was a question about the implementation blueprint. We also have a training and professional development blueprint that really talks about what do you need to think about, pay attention to as you do professional development and training on PBIS. And at the end of that document, there's a trainer coach assessment that really provides you the opportunity to evaluate what is the knowledge base I have at tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3. We would encourage teams to use that to help them reflect on what is the level of expertise we have on our team. What we've done here at the University of Missouri is we've taken that trainer coach assessment, which is coming out of that professional development blueprint. And you can see a snapshot on there where it kind of gives you the criteria in the right-hand column of how to score and how to evaluate yourself. We turn that into a Google Doc. So that way you could have the trainers, the coaches, whoever is sitting on your team wearing that hat of expertise. You could take this, each person take this individually, and then you could look and see across the team, what level of expertise do we have at tier 1? What level of expertise do we have at tier 2, tier 3? So that way you can make sure that you've got the expertise you need across tiers and across levels. And so that'll be a resource that I'll leave you with today as well. But that brings us to a checkpoint. So we just talked about composition, kind of who needs to be on the team. And I tried to give you a little bit of a rationale as to why. But let's open up the lines and make sure that if you've got a question about composition, we work to clarify it.
Hey, Kelsey, this is Becky Millspaugh. I'm one of your biggest fans, so I'm so glad I get to ask a question. I don't mind asking a question if it sounds stupid, I'm okay with that. But the question I have is, when we did the blueprint and traditional training that we've done in the past, we've said quarterly meetings, at least do quarterly meetings with your district team across the year. And I just heard the word monthly, and I was wondering if you can kind of clarify what that could and should look like.
Yeah, and so I'm so glad that you asked that question, because that is one of the items that's going to come up in a few minutes, and we're going to touch on that a little bit more. So what I'm going to do is kind of give you the quick version, and then we're going to go a little bit deeper in a few minutes. But you did hear correctly. We are talking monthly, and you're correct. It did, when we would do the old blueprints self-assessment, we would talk quarterly. And now we really are saying monthly in order to keep our fingers on the pulse of data across buildings, really work to make sure that we're aligning resources and that we're working efficiently and effectively. All of the teams that we work with meet on a monthly basis. And that's one of the things that we've put into the DSFI is to be fully implementing meeting on a monthly basis. Thank you, Becky, for asking the question. I really appreciate you being the first person to unmute yourself and call into our radio show here today.
Kelsey, then let me be the second. Hi, it's Tim Sable.
Hi.
Hi. So I know it's important to make sure that you have stakeholder representation, but as many of us probably have experienced, sometimes you get too many cooks in the kitchen and it's difficult to make any kind of decisions. Do you have any recommendations about a number of folks to be on that team?
That's a great question. I can speak to experience, kind of how our teams have adopted that, because we've got some urban teams, some suburban teams, and some rural teams. So in terms of stakeholder representation in our rural teams, it's really challenging because as those of us who have worked with rural districts know, we are doing a lot with a little. And so we're depending upon those worker bees. We're depending upon those people that don't mind a little bit extra on an already overflowing plate to be a part of this work. So in some of our rural teams, that's been the hardest part, is to make sure that we have stakeholder representation. So we have to think clever. You know, could it be that one person's wearing multiple hats? And then if they are wearing multiple hats, making sure that they understand that. So that way they are working as a team with their hat on. And so in some of our rural teams, it's been really challenging to have that community perspective on our teams. That being said, with some of our newer teams who are trying to find their footing, we've talked about give yourself grace, give yourself the permission to not have that right away, because the worst thing that you could do is bring a community member onto a team that really doesn't know what they're doing yet, because that's not going to feed into the support, the buy-in, the believe in the process. Once you've got your footing, once you kind of have an action plan and you know where you're going, then take a step back and say, okay, how could we bring a community member in? In some of our urban areas, it's a little bit easier to have that community representation or to have those stakeholders. And in some of our largest districts, they've divided into sub-teams. So they have the main district leadership team, and then each person on that district leadership team is connected out to a sub-team. So when it gets to professional development, there's somebody that's on what they call the makers team. And that makers team has way more stakeholder engagement on that coming from within the district than on the actual district leadership team itself. Or when it gets to things about stakeholder engagement, they actually have a stakeholder engagement sub-team. Okay, now we've got people from the actual community that are on that. And so to kind of get at your sense of sometimes we do get too many cooks in the kitchen, absolutely. That was one way that they went about addressing it, is creating sub-teams so that way they didn't feel that they were encountering that scenario. Tim, was that helpful? I want to make sure that I really clarify your question.
Yeah, no, very much so. Thanks, Kelsey.
Let's jump in then to our next C, all about characteristics.
Kelsey?
Yes, please.
Sorry, it's Kelly. There is a question in the chat that's asking about measuring essentially attendance, because it's getting at that kind of attending a certain percentage of meetings. Could you just speak to that really quickly, please?
Yeah, thanks, Kelly, for drawing my attention to that. And Tyler, I see that you put that through the chat, kind of wanting to know, when we say regular attendance, what's regular? Is it, like you put in the chat, 90% of meetings? I think that's something that we have not identified for teams. That's something that teams would have to come together and talk about. And I think that's a great way for them to build collective agreement, establish expectations, establish team norms. When we say we need to come regularly to meetings, what is regularly? Because life happens. We want to be able to give grace to people when, in the year of a pandemic, no less, people need a little extra grace. And so I think that's something that a team would establish. What's our meeting frequency? Hopefully it's monthly. Establishing that expectation, we need people to attend regularly. And then if we're asking people from outside of the district, so people within the community to attend these, we do need to exercise a little bit more grace. helping them understand what are the meetings that are going to be most beneficial for you to attend, because it could be that we've got a meeting that's really just about budget, okay? It's not as important for that person to attend. So kind of working within a team to identify that would probably be best, but then also going back to the team meeting minutes, because if we've said what our definition of regularly is, we do want to be able to kind of hold ourselves accountable for that, to check on that. But in answer to your question, there's no hard and fast rule about 3 out of 4 meetings, 90% attendance. And Tyler, I see your chat response, so I'm glad that that helped. And Kelly, thank you for drawing my attention to the chat. I appreciate that. Let's jump into characteristics. So with 1.4, the team needs to be led or facilitated by a coordinator, somebody who actually has the time to move the team forward, to get everybody around the table, to collaborate on setting the vision, and really facilitate the monthly team meeting. So every team has a leader. This team needs a leader too. And so this person not only needs to have the time available to do that. So one of the things we would think about is, what's the FTE? Does this person have time in their dedicated job, their job description, their roles and responsibility to do this work? And we would want them to have experience in database decision-making, because we're going to be using data. So the main idea of this one is, we got to have somebody that's got the time to help the team complete the coordination task and knows how to pay attention to data to use it for decision-making. So thinking about that, what could you do? How could you help a team with that? Well, do they have a coordinator? Has somebody been assigned? Some larger districts have a specific role within the district for PBIS, school climate, MTSS, SEB coordination. Okay, that oftentimes is a role. But maybe it's not in a district that you work with. So we think about it in a different way. We try to think clever. Could we have people within the district that are doing something akin to PBS? Maybe they've been managing a grant. Maybe they are an administrator for counselors in the district. So they've kind of got that executive level space. So thinking about those, do you have people that you could use in that capacity on your team? And do they have experience with database decision making? And one of the things that we had to think through on our team is, when we say experience, what's that mean? Well, we don't have an interview protocol to ask you how much experience you have. There's no assessment that we have to kind of see like, oh, they're at a 70% when it comes to database decision making. This really would be a conversation about, okay, kind of within your professional world, how do you use data to make decisions on a regular basis to ascertain what is the level of experience this person has? Now, if you're in a district that's really kind of in that space of getting a coordinator, kind of identifying who could this be, I want to draw your attention to the PBIS Training and Professional Development Blueprint. There's a section in there all about district coordinators and thinking through kind of, you see there in the bulleted list, these are the things that they would be doing: planning and facilitating the DLT meetings, overseeing the PD implementation, evaluation efforts, working to link school needs based upon data back to the district's larger PD plan. So all these things that they would be doing. And the pro tip that we take away from that blueprint is, these oftentimes could be people you already have but don't know it. So don't necessarily think about job title, think about job responsibilities. What is this person experienced in? So maybe they're already a director of a department that kind of parallels to this work, and they would be a great person. Or they're a program specialist, or they oversee school counselors, school psychs in the districts. So step out of that box of job title and really step into the larger box of job experiences and qualifications. The caveat being, this would be really challenging if you were a building level person. You're a building level person and you're trying to get everybody else in the district on board with something. It's really challenging for them to see you as anything other than a building level person. You could get there, but the road is long and hard. So think about, do we have somebody already at the district level who could be this person? Somebody who already kind of has eyes and ears and fingertips on what's going on across the district. It's going to make that work a little bit easier for them. And then making sure, do they have time in their job to do this work? And the database decision-making aspect as well. Once we've got somebody who's going to coordinate the team, now we've got a team who's meeting regularly. And this gets to a question that we heard earlier about the frequency of meeting. So we're going to have operating procedures in place. So they want to be meeting monthly, coming together on a monthly basis using a standard meeting agenda and problem solving process. And the example we give is TIPS, team initiated problem solving, or whatever the district or, lots of states and commonwealths have problem solving processes that they teach and train on as part of the PBIS work within that state or commonwealth. And so maybe that's what this district team is going to use as well. But the important thing is that they've got something that they pay attention to. They have a method for problem solving based upon data, and that's part of their operating procedures. The goal being that these specific components, kind of the nuts and bolts and the logistics of how we work, that's how we know that when we come together, it's going to be an efficient meeting and it's going to be an effective meeting. And so the reflective thing that you could use with a team is thinking about, hey, do we meet monthly? Let's go to the district calendar. Show me when our meetings are scheduled. Okay. Is there the opportunity to move from quarterly to monthly? Or what types of gains can we make in order to meet much more frequently? Do we have a standard meeting template? Are we relying on Kelsey this meeting to come up with the agenda, but next time it's Cassandra and the time after that it's Mateo? Do we have a process in place to get an agenda set every time? And I'll show you in just a minute an example template that you could use with the essential elements of an agenda. And then do we have a problem solving process? When things pop up, when decisions need to be made, do we have a way to go about doing that? So the pro tip we give is design agenda templates to include assigned roles and responsibilities. Do we know who is going to be the facilitator, the note taker, the timekeeper, the communicator, whatever your roles and responsibilities are? Have a way to check team member names and attendance, a way to list out the agenda items so people know this is what we're talking about today, and then notes. Let's take notes on what happened in the course of our conversation today. And then a parking lot for what are we going to talk about next month? What do we need to bring back? And then a way to evaluate the team meeting. So kind of checking, did we do what we said we would? Was this an efficient use of your time? Now, I also want to draw your attention on this template. If you look at the side on the right, okay, and I know it's small, but let me see if I can spotlight this, the power of Zoom. Go back. It says, what are 3 big ideas that need to be shared with the community and executive leadership? So it's under that category of meeting review. And I say that because in just a minute, we're going to talk about two-way communication between the team and executive level leaders, or the team and the larger community. So what we advocate for, or a pro tip, is make that part of your template. If you know that you need to be communicating out, soliciting for input and feedback, have that be a standard part of your meeting agenda. So at the end, you're always thinking, what do we need to share? What questions do we need to raise? 1.6 is about action planning. Each time we come together, it should be purposeful. And so what we advocate for is that a team is developing a 3 to 5 year action plan that's guided by the DSFI. So you take the DSFI, you look at the results, and as a team, you identify what are our priority items, what are our items for celebration, and within those priority items, what are things that we can put within a long-term action plan that we hope to accomplish within the next 3 to 5 years. And that's going to give us the purpose each time we come to the table as a team. And it's going to give us the opportunity to think strategically about matching resources and aligning the work. It's going to guide our work. And so when we clearly articulate that, when we move from, okay, I got a 1 on this item of the DSFI to, okay, yes, I got a 1, that's my current reality. What do I need to move it to fully implemented? Okay, it's going to take these steps in order for me to move from partially implemented to fully implemented. Okay, it's going to help me implement the full continuum of supports. It's going to help me stay attuned to the data, and it's really going to work to make sure that our action plan that we come up with as a DLT is really aligned to the bigger picture, vision, mission, priorities, goals of the district. So we tell people, think, do you have an action plan? Has it been updated in the past year? Does your action plan move you past just the next school year? Really thinking long term. Because yeah, we would want to have short term. What are we going to focus on this year? But we always want to have one eye on the future. Okay, so when something's done this year, let's take from the long-term action plan and bring it in. So that way we keep that momentum going. Does the work that we say is important actually align with the larger vision of the district? Because if we're over here doing PBIS and everything else is over here, we're siloed work. We're not integrating into what's actually happening in the district, and people oftentimes aren't going to view the work as being important because it doesn't factor into what the district's paying attention to. So we want to really work to make sure it's aligned with the larger vision, mission, and improvement plan of the district. The template that we created, and again, it's going to be linked and I'll drop it into the chat. You can see here, it's got a column for area of implementation in that far left column. There's a little drop down menu, and that's where you would pick which of the DSFI categories or domains, leadership teaming, stakeholder engagement, training, coaching, etc. Your action plan goal, that next column over, would just be the wording for what fully implemented is. That's where you're headed. That's your goal. So what is it going to take to be fully implemented? That's what's going to go there. The action steps, that's the work of the team, coming up with what's our pathway? How are we going to get there? And then having that status column is going to help you each time you check on your action plan to say, is it in progress? Is it not yet started? Have we met our goal? And then you can see as you move across the right, persons responsible, resources needed. When do we expect that we're going to start this? So projected start date, projected completion date, and evaluation, outcome, and data sources. So we try to give people kind of a one-stop shop, so to speak, to create an action plan that's aligned back to the DSFI. One of the things that you'll notice when you look at that, when you click on the link that I share, is you're going to have the opportunity to build one for short term, 1 year, and also build one for long term, 3 to 5 years. So what we do with the teams that we work with, and I'm going to show you an example right here. Here's an actual team of ours. So you can see that first column is just the section, the domain from the DSFI. The second column, column B, the goal, that's the wording for fully implemented. And then the team worked on everything from column C through I. That was a conversation we had. Now, we didn't get there overnight. We took the DSFI, we came back as a team and did some data analysis. We looked at all of the results and we had team members spin their votes. You got to choose as a member of the team your top 3 areas for priority. And you could spend all 3 dots on one area, or you could divide them 1 dot across 3 different areas. But at the end of that process, as a team, we voted on where are we going to go. And anything that didn't have the most votes was identified as being important. And even if it had no votes, it went on the long-term action plan. So anything that wasn't fully implemented goes on the long-term action plan. And then the team was able to prioritize what are we going to work on this year, this first year. But this is a simple example. And I don't want to say simple because they put some really great work into it. But I think it's a good solid example of what a team could do using the data from the DSFI to action plan. So we just talked about team characteristics, having a coordinator, having a regular kind of protocols for when we meet and having an action plan. Those are key characteristics of a team. So let's open the lines back up. And what questions do you have about any of those three?
Can I ask a question?
I would love to.
I'm wondering about the coordinator on the team. Do you have any teams that maybe have co-coordinators or co-facilitators?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think that it's wise to do that depending upon the size of your team and what resources are available in your district. Because if you're in a district where you have a district line item to fund a PBIS coordinator and that's their job, and maybe they've got a department under them, there are the resources there available to do, solo leadership, so to speak. But in some districts, that's a luxury that doesn't exist. And so thinking about, okay, how could two of us partner and co-facilitate and co-lead? Absolutely. The main goal is that somebody's leading, or somebody's, that you've got people that are coordinating the work on a regular basis and that they've got the time to do it and the experience with database decision making.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for asking the question. Other questions about kind of the characteristics of a team. And I do want to let you know that all the slides that we've drafted will be available for you. I'll send it to Tina in a PDF, and she's got all your email addresses, so she'll send it out to you to make sure that everybody's got the content we covered today. Let's move into our third and final C. This one's all about communication. So as we start to talk about it, I want you to carry in your mind that this team's going to be doing a lot of work. We don't want any secrets. People get suspicious when they don't know what's going on. And there's too much good work to not celebrate and share out, and definitely receive feedback too. So as we move into our final C, we're talking about communication. First, we're talking about communication with executive leadership. So this is a tap back to that early C, all about kind of the composition of the team. Wanting somebody on the team who has the authority to make decisions. At the same time, we want to be in communication with our executive level leaders. We want two-way communication. We want to make sure that we're not only just sending information up to keep central office informed, keep the superintendent informed, or the deputy superintendent informed, the superintendent's cabinet, whoever they may be. We want them to be informed. And we also want them to be able to give feedback on the process. We want to be able to ask questions and get answers, share information and get perspective. That's going to really help us make sure that what we do as a district leadership team stays in alignment with the larger vision of the district. And so making sure that as your team gets their footing, becomes fully formed, thinking about we've got to have a consistent method in place to share updates, to receive feedback, because it's ultimately going to help guide the decision-making process. This is why a few minutes earlier, I wanted to draw your attention to that portion on the standard meeting template, the agenda template. So that way, whatever your meeting looks like, whatever your agenda looks like, I really do encourage you to carve out space on it to identify what is the information we're sharing, what are the questions we need to ask, who's going to ask those questions and bring the information back. We want to create this feedback loop, so to speak, in this cycle between this district leadership team and our executive level leaders. So I just kind of identified that, teacher brain doing the think alouds, thinking about what information is going to be shared. With whom is it being shared? So who is this information going to? What are we soliciting? Who's doing the sharing? And then thinking about a communication plan. So this is something that we encourage teams to think about and develop as time progresses. You're not going to show up on day one and say, okay, let's come up with a communication plan. So this is something that you progress to, but it's really identifying, and I'll show you an example in just a minute, all those questions that you see there on that team assessment. What are we sharing? With whom are we sharing it? Because the goal is that on a regular basis, and you'll see here for in-district communication with executive level leaders, at least monthly, we're sharing and receiving information, keeping each other up to date and current. Communication with key stakeholders. So if 1.7 executive level leaders is happening in district, now we're talking about in the community, making sure that our larger community, and you'll see here, it says at least quarterly, has a chance to be updated, receive information, stay current as best as possible about what's happening with PBIS implementation in the district, but then also we're soliciting feedback. You know, if we're doing a specific practice at tier 1, do you know that? Do your kids exemplify that? Or if you're in the larger community, are you kind of hearing it, seeing it, observing it? So we want to think about how are we communicating with those outside the district and in the community? And it's because we mentioned earlier, this district leadership team is overseeing implementation across all sites. It represents in its membership all the stakeholders. So we need to be getting feedback from those stakeholders. And so what we talk about is come up with a list of key stakeholders. So thinking through, you know, all of the different representations in your community and in your district, who are those populations, so to speak, those target audiences that you want to make sure to get the right information at the right time? And can you plan to do that quarterly? And looking at your, I'll show you in just a minute, a stakeholder engagement plan to make sure that you're doing it quarterly, but you could also look at your meeting agendas to kind of have that checked as well. And making sure that you're soliciting feedback, not just purely sharing, but really getting some information back too. And so here's an example of what a stakeholder engagement plan and process looks like. So you can see that first column is asking the objective, and I'm just going to kind of look at that first row there. The objective is significant family and or community members are involved when appropriate and possible. So making sure that people are involved in the process. And they actually took that item from the self-assessment survey, the SAS. So they're using data to inform their stakeholder engagement plan. And then you can see that they've got a goal in the second column, action steps, status, who's responsible. And in this instance, it's because that SAS item, the self-assessment survey, was happening at the individual level, or sometimes we think about it, individual students akin to tier 3. This was going to be the district tier 3 coach. So that's the person that's going to work on that communication. The target audience was going to be school officials and school admins, but also for external families, community members. How can we get people more involved in our advanced tiers of support? And notice that they're thinking about, is it information we're sharing? Are we disseminating data? Or are we highlighting accomplishments? And so for that one, it's information. We're sharing information about our tier 3 process, so that way you can stay informed. And the methods that they were going to do, the methods, they've got 3 columns all the way to the right. Is it a print mailer? Is it electronic on the website? Or is it just verbal communication? So this is an example of how you could build a stakeholder engagement plan to make sure that you're getting information out and also planning to receive information from both inside and outside the district in the larger community. The last item we'll talk about today is goal identification. So this is 1.9, and this is going to wrap up section 1, domain 1 on leadership teaming. The team needs to have a goal. Where are we going? What's the purpose of this work? What are we doing here? And it really needs to be tied into the larger work of the district. So with this item, we want to make sure that the promotion of positive school climate, social, emotional, behavioral health, that in the district says that's important. It's so important that we're going to make sure that either school climate, social, emotional, behavioral health, or something right there in that is in our top 5 permanent goals as a district for the next 3 to 5 years. Because when it's prioritized and it's clearly represented as one of the district's focal points, something they're really driving towards, It builds that political sustainability, that financial sustainability, and just purely the implementation sustainability. So everything we talked about before, items 1.1 to 1.8 really happens within the autonomy or the responsibility rather of the district. Now here we are in 1.9 saying, okay, we're only as powerful as what our district prioritizes. So what we would hope is that a team would think about, okay, can we actually find the district's strategic plan? Is it documented and easily accessible to all audiences? Hopefully you could go to your district's website and somewhere on there easily, being the key word, you could find what it is that the district's prioritizing, their goals, their focal points for the next 3 to 5 years, and that within those, positive school climate or social emotional behavioral health is an actual goal and not a strategy to achieve a goal. We really want to have this be a goal in order to sustain the work. Okay. So that brings us to our last checkpoint. So we just talked about communication, communicating internally, communicating externally, and that this work of PBIS is espoused to the community and to all external audiences as a primary goal. So let's pause right there and check in with each other and make sure that you get your questions answered before we start to wrap up and talk about resources and next steps.
I have a quick question if I can ask.
Please do.
Okay. You kind of opened up my mind a little bit here, just thinking about what we've done in our district to really formalize a team, a district level team. And we actually have a strategic plan group called Goal 4, which is equity, fairness, and justice. But Goal 4 equity really focuses on our PBS district wide team. My question I want to ask you, you just showed the action plan. Should we be focusing on information, disseminating data, or accomplishments at these meetings, or do you feel like it's better to really focus in on one particular area, or do you have to just kind of go with where you're at in terms of, you know, what you're really keying on at that moment in time?
Let me go back a few slides because I want to make sure that I am picking up what you're putting down. So you said I just showed that action plan. Are you talking about this stakeholder engagement plan here?
Yes, sir. Yeah, I might have had the wrong. Yes, that's the one I'm talking about. And they have the categories there. Yeah.
So what I think I heard in your question is, do you need to focus on information, data, accomplishments every time you meet? You know, kind of what's the what here? Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah. So I would say that because this is something that you're doing quarterly, you might carve out time on an agenda. Say, okay, you know, in the fall, we're going to talk about stakeholder engagement. We're going to check in our stakeholder engagement plan in November. We're going to check again on it in March, and then we're going to come back to it in July, or kind of whatever your quarterly rotation is. And then when you come to meet, think about, okay, what information can we push out to help people better understand what we're doing? By this point in time, do we have data that we can push out and share? And when we think about data, we think about celebrations. How do we help people understand, wow, our attendance rate is through the roof, or we've done this amazing thing with behavior in these buildings, in this cohort. And that kind of gets into accomplishments as well. Lots of times districts will share TFI data. So thinking about, okay, how can we take building level data and create a district composite to show people across this district, here's how we're doing with tier 1, here's how we're doing with tier 2, here's how we're doing with tier 3. Now, these aren't things that need to be shared monthly when the team meets monthly, but you want to kind of think about how can we check on these quarterly to make sure that we're communicating them quarterly. I will say that when we come back together in January, this is going to be our topic. We're going to talk about stakeholder engagement specifically, and I've got some examples from districts we've worked with to give you some ideas.
Thank you.
Did that clarify or support your question?
Yes.
Great. Others. It's that easy, folks. It's that easy. Okay. Let's talk about resources. So here are the resources that I've highlighted for you today. We talked about the meeting agenda and template, the action plan template, the PBIS trainer coach assessment, the stakeholder engagement plan. I right now am going to open up the chat. Let's see if I can open up my files. I'm going to drop this into the chat right now. Oh, it looks like it's not allowing me to do that. Sorry, every Zoom's just slightly different. Some allow you to drop in files and some don't. Never fear. What I'm going to do is when I send the slides to Tina, I will send her the resources PDF. So that way, everything that you see on the screen here, you can click on the image or click on the title. It'll actually open that up for you. But you'll have those that I highlighted today. In addition, you're also going to have the new copy of the DSFI that we just finished revising based upon national feedback. We did it through a pilot year last year, gathered a lot of national feedback, went back, updated the language, and so you'll have that new version. You'll also have in the middle right there, it says PBIS District Leadership Team Practice Guide. Our team has authored a practice guide with chapters devoted to each section or domain of the DSFI. So what I'm going to give you access to, and it's stamped draft, do not disseminate, because we're still in the revision process, because right now it's going through National Center review and approval. But we've been given the green light to share when we do TA sessions like this. I'm going to give you the overview and introduction chapter, because it's going to help you talk the talk about the logic of district-wide implementation. I'm also going to give you the chapter all about leadership teaming. So you'll have that as well, those two chapters. And leadership teaming is going to complement everything we talked about today. And then you may feel that it takes you a little bit deeper in some of the specific items. That third document there is, we just finished this fall, a targeted brief. So, briefs sometimes are about 10 pages. Practice guides tend to be about 20 plus. We wrote a targeted brief, so 2 pages all about the logic of district-wide implementation, specifically increasing district capacity to support PBIS. I want to share that with you specifically because it's a great takeaway for you. It's also a great kind of a leave behind as you start to solicit district team membership, or you start to share back with your colleagues, what did we talk about? Here's what we talked about. Let me give you a 2-pager. So that way you kind of have the big idea, the big picture, a nice synopsis of this work. On the right-hand side, our team here at the University of Missouri hosts a Winter Institute every year for the district that we work with in the state. This recent year, so back in February, our Winter Institute was organized around the 9 sections and domains of the DSFI. So we had a session all on leadership teaming, a session all on policy and system support, a session all on stakeholder engagement. So it's a conference that we host. And what we did this year is not just organize the sessions around the DSFI, but we actually had our districts be the exemplar presenters. So I've given you access to that website so you can click and look at the materials that go along with each one of those 9 conference presentations pertaining back to the individual parts of the DSFI. So all of that's going to be there in the resources PDF that I'll send to Tina. Let's talk about what's next. Up next, we're going to come back together on Thursday, January the 28th, 1 in the afternoon again. And that time we're specifically going to talk about stakeholder engagement and also talk about funding and alignment. So it's a twofer. We're going to talk about domains 2 and 3. So that's our next session. Now, and Tina, if I'm speaking out of turn, please bring me in. But I believe that you all are working under the understanding that there is a modicum of inter-session work, that there's some things that you're going to do until we meet again. So that way you're activating your new learning, you're applying your new learning, kind of working to build these systems within your districts. So what I'm going to ask you to do until we come back together is reflect on today's content all about leadership teaming. Okay, we talked about the 3 C's: composition, characteristics, and communication. And we really just focused on items 1.1 to 1.9. I want you to reflect on that content and then go back and look at your district's organizational chart. Who makes sense for your team? If you've already got a team that you're working with, use the information that we talked about today to cross-check that membership. Do you have all the roles and responsibilities that should be represented actually represented? So I encourage you to use the slides focused on item 1.2, team membership, and draft a roster. Because I think that your goal is to have at least one team meeting by the end of this school year, 2020, 2021. So a pro tip that I want to leave you with: make a table listing the team members' names. So, I've got Kelsey, I've got Cassandra, I've got Mateo, I've got Bailey. And then what's their position, their title, what's the role or population, kind of the stakeholder group they represent. So if you go to slide 24, when you have these slides and it lists out A through G on slide 24, see if you can build a table with A through G and fill that in with names of people in your district that would fit that area. And I also want to tap back to the question earlier: is there somebody, somebody said, could we co-facilitate? Could we co-lead? Absolutely, absolutely. But those are your next steps and a pro tip to leave you with. But that brings us to the end of our time together today. I know it's 1:30, we were 1:30 Central, 2:30 Eastern. We were scheduled for that time, but let's kind of close out with any final questions and answers. And then Tina, Kelly, is there anything that you want to make sure that they know and are able to do before they go?
I just want to say that I will be getting I'll get the recording, I'll get all the materials definitely as quick as possible to our panelists, our teams. And for the rest of the folks, I'll be getting it all posted on our PaPBS website. So I will follow up with this.
And Tina, you're also going to send a link to complete an evaluation for the session, right?
I am.
Yep.
Yes, I am. And you're going to send me that link, correct?
It's in your inbox.
Oh, okay. All right.
Any questions that I know earlier you talked about having people send things through the Q&A? Anything that we need to touch on before we close out?
No.
Okay. Well, it was a pleasure to be here with all of you today. I look forward to coming back in the new year. Let's hear it for a new year, folks. Let's hear it for a new year.
Oh my gosh, you're kidding.
Yes. Ready to come back.
And those of you who are on here that are still my panelists, I will be following up with the expectations and the stipend that we'll be providing for you to support you on your endeavors with this. So look for that from me. Any questions from me on that? I'm always a person you can email first and I can get to the right people to answer the question. Thanks everybody for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.